Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making the time today.
Thank you.
If I didn't know anything about you, but I would meet your brother, how would you describe you to me?
Depends which brother. I have two different brothers. I'd say in Ireland we have an expression, they're a bit of a chancer, which means like they go for like the kind of the crazy option or the like not the kind of the like unlikely scenario. So you try to do something that's maybe not so likely and you have a chance at it basically. So I think I've always had this personality type where just kind of trying to do things that seem a little bit crazy and seeing if I can make it happen. And it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it comes together nicely. I'd say also like hardworking maybe, because I think we come from a family where we all kind of work pretty hard as well. So
Has your family been very business minded when you grew up?
yes and no. So I come from like a blue collar type of family. So my dad was a carpenter. My uncles are like farmers. They're electricians. They're like plumbers. So everyone was kind of self-employed, but it wasn't like really business hustle, like not like you see nowadays. This is obviously, of course, pre-internet. So it was just like, if you can provide for yourself and keep the money coming in, perfect. I think there's always been the like self-employed side to my family. Like me, my two brothers were both all self-employed. We all have our own businesses, but the business side of thing, I really felt like that was lacking growing up actually. So I grew up, makes me sound kind of old, but I kind of grew up pre-internet in Ireland. We didn't really have it in the house till I was like 15, 16. And it's pretty crazy to see that nowadays. Like there's so much good content. There's so much good resources. You can podcast, books, videos, courses, whatever it is. Back then, that didn't really exist. So I was kind of entrepreneurial when I was younger. Like I used to skateboard. So this is kind of, piracy, but I would buy skateboarding videos from the US and I would like reproduce them on a cassette and then like sell it to the other skateboarders. So like pirating the top skateboarding videos and just selling it at my local skateboard spot. So stuff like that.
How old were you when you did that?
Yeah, I was like around 14, 15. So I come from a great family, but like we never had like so much money growing up. So like anything that you could do to make a few extra dollars was huge. Like, so that was kind of one of the original hustles. And then there was another one as well. I don't know if you remember this or if this is in your country, but for a couple of like months, there was these Live Strong, I think it was called. It was like a bracelet for awareness for something. I think it was for cancer.
Oh, these plastic things.
Yeah.
I remember.
These are huge in my school, but nobody could buy any. So I actually figured out a way that I could buy it from like China or something. So I bought like 300 of these things and basically just like flooded my school. Like everyone had like 5 of these. Like I just crushed the whole market. Like in the beginning they were cool because there's only a few. But then by the end, it was like totally oversaturated.
So you basically started your first business as a teenager. So first reselling those skateboarding videos and then reselling those bands. I think that's a very business-driven mindset, especially at that young age. And you said your family has been kind of self-employed, but not like they all had their own business, but not on the internet. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was always just kind of make your own money sort of scenario. So from a very young age, it was like pretty clear if you wanted like that extra bicycle or if you wanted to whatever, like you're gonna have to figure out a way to make that cash. So I actually worked from a super young age as well, like 12, 13, like going off working for the full summer with like my uncles. And in Ireland back then, like the laws are pretty loose, so you could get like a lot of like kind of proper jobs at a super at a super young age. I doubt you could do it nowadays. So yeah, I just been kind of working since forever, a lot of different jobs, and then trying to do stuff with the business side of things. But I didn't figure it out for years actually. Like all the stuff I tried when I was younger were just tiny little hustles, and it wasn't until way later, like later 20s actually, that I got into freelancing and started to make something work.
What do you think has happened at that time that helped you create kind of the life that you have now, where you got a lot more money in and felt like you figured things out?
At the beginning, it wasn't like even trying to be an entrepreneur per se. It was just like to have money basically. So in Ireland, it's quite nice. We have free education to a point. Like you don't have the debt that a lot of people in the US would have, let's say, but you still have to like pay for registration and pay for your books and stuff. So went to university and I was like, okay, what's a good degree to make money? So I studied construction engineering, which the goal was to develop property. And this is a good paying job in Ireland at the time. We had this big like property kind of craze. But by the time I graduated, it actually crashed. It was like a total bubble, but people didn't see that at the time. So after that, I was a little bit kind of sour at like education. I was like, okay, what's like a different way that I can now make money? So got online, started like Googling what's some options, and I seen that you could go to Australia and work on these massive farms and make like 1,000 a day. Or you could go to Canada and work in the oil industry as like an oil laborer and make 1,000 a day. And because I'm a redhead, I was like, if I go to Australia, I'm going to fry in the sun. So I was like, I guess I got to go to Canada because, you know, it's cold, but at least I won't be like burnt. So went to Canada over 3-4 years, worked my way up like the oil industry ladder to a pretty good position. And again, it was just like a focus on, because I grew up kind of poor. So I was like, I want to just be financially stable. I want to have money. Like I don't want to want for these things that I, you know, used to. So I enjoyed that work. Actually, it was kind of fun for a while. But then the oil industry crashed as well. The price of oil dropped really bad, which in Canada, it's quite expensive to take it out of the ground. The oil there takes a lot of work. So when the price drops below a certain point, they just shut down the whole industry and they just wait for a better year. So overnight, just lost that job. Everyone I worked with was pretty much let go. And at that stage, I was like, okay, sometimes, you know, education just doesn't work out. I try working my way up this like corporate ladder and like really putting everything into this company and showing I was like the best worker. They just let me go. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of done with this. Like I'm going to figure out how to make my own source of income. So at that time I had a friend in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. So he's like, come down, it's cheap. Like your money's going to go a lot further. So I moved down there and I started different ideas. I still had the mindset of when I was younger, which was like, to make money online, you need like a crazy idea. That's what I thought. So I did all these like, like pretty ridiculous things. I met an app that like kind of automated Tinder. So you could send like loads of messages. You could set up these auto replies. You could change your location, all this sort of stuff. Because Tinder had just come out like kind of recently at that time. So I was like, okay, I'll just make this thing that like does everything you need to on Tinder. But I didn't really see that people could abuse this, which is pretty obvious looking back. So a lot of nightclubs or scams would download this app, set up like a hot person profile. And then once they set it up, it would like match with everyone. And then it would start sending like automatic messages like, hey, we have promotions, like 2-for-1 whiskey on Friday night. So Tinder basically had to like change their API to shut down this app. I just ended up selling the idea to someone else. I met a Conor McGregor cereal box. I don't know if I've told you that story before, but
I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tell me about it.
Just silly ideas. So I heard the story about the guys who started Airbnb, that they were stuck for money and they made this like Obama cereal box and the other, I think it was like McCain or something, the other person trying to run for president. So they actually did pretty well. They made like 30,000-40,000 out of this and it helped fund the start of Airbnb. So I heard this idea. I was like, oh, I should take that idea. That sounds like really, you know, creative. So at that time, I was like, who's the person that everyone's kind of paying attention to? And Conor McGregor had this big fight coming up. So I was like, oh, I'll make a Conor McGregor cereal box. I'll get some hype and I'll make, you know, easy money as well. So did this and I sold a few and I started to get a lot of publicity. Like I was able to get some stories and different things. But then I just got this letter like straight away from Conor McGregor and his lawyer that's like, hey, you don't have permission to do this, obviously. So shut it down. And the laws in Ireland are, it doesn't have to be how much money I made, it's how much you damage their brand. So if Conor McGregor could say, hey, I lost this promotional deal with this other cereal company because you have a fake one, and he lost like $1 million deal, then I owe him $1 million. So yeah, straight away I had to just like shut it all down. So
at least it was just a letter and you didn't.
Yeah. It was gone within like 12 hours. Like when they explained because the lawyer explained this, they're like, hey, if you continue to do this and you're up for any damages you cause his brand, which is obviously like a massive brand. So I was like, oh, okay. So after this, I was like, okay, I got to change my approach. I can't just like make these silly ideas. So this is how I got into freelancing. I was like, I'm going to have to learn a real skill that actually can help people and like build up my skill set from the ground, because started to see that without skills, if it's just ideas actually don't go too far. Like you need the ability to put it into action.
I think that's one of the big things where people kind of have ideas, but it's one type of person that has ideas. It's another type of person that actually actions them and makes it a reality. When you say you went freelance to have a real skill, what skill was it that you concentrated on?
Yeah. So from all these crazy ideas, one thing that kind of kept popping up was I needed a website to sell whatever or promote whatever. So I was learning just a little bit how to do it. So when it went to like, well, how could I freelance? I just kind of seen like, okay, every business for the most part needs a website. I can provide the website. But my approach in the beginning was terrible again. Like everything in the beginning, everything in the beginning of my business journey just kind of went like 100% wrong. So I went on Upwork with no idea how to pitch it, how to sell it, how to get good clients, any of this stuff. So I was just basically like underpricing everyone. That was like my only kind of tactic. Like, I'll do it for this price. Luckily I was in Colombia, and at that time it was super cheap down there. Like my living expenses for the month were like $300-400. Like it was really cheap, like all in. So I was like, if I could just get a couple of projects, because my savings from oil were running out with all these crazy ideas. So I was like, if I can just get a couple of projects, I can make it work, and then I can go from there. So I was doing like full websites for like $100, multi-page websites for like $140. And my clients were like crazy. They were like the worst ideas, like changing their mind every day. So that went on for a while, and I just didn't know how to get out of that scenario. And what eventually happened actually was I took a job at like, he's probably like 14-year-old kid, and he had this idea for an app that was just ridiculous. Like it didn't make any sense. So he hired me for like $115 or something. So I started building his website, and literally like a couple of times a day, he would change his mind. Like he wanted the whole website to be purple, then he wanted it to be brown, and it just didn't make any sense. Like the website looked horrible. So eventually I was like, dude, like we got to wrap up this project. Like it's only $115. He's like, oh, you don't tell me what to do. Like you have to do this. They're going to leave you a bad review. And I was like, I'm done. Like, what am I doing? I'm like 26, working for a 14-year-old, like making no money. And this is after oil, where I was making like $1,000 a day, like, you know, a year before this. So I was like, what is going on? So I just like shut down my Upwork profile. I had a few days where I was like, where am I going with this? Like, do I just travel back, live in my parents' house? Do I go back and try to get some sort of job in Canada? I just really thought about like why it didn't work with those projects. Why couldn't I make more? And I started to really just like try and think about things from the business's perspective. And I seen that those clients literally couldn't pay me anymore. Like that kid didn't have any more money. His idea wasn't even good. These other clients that I worked with didn't have businesses, didn't have cash flow, didn't have real customers. They just had these kind of like goofy ideas, no offense to them. So I was never going to make money with these people. So I started to look around and be like, who would actually have real money to put into a website that could actually help their business? So I found one person, which was, at the time I was doing my permanent residency for Canada, because I'd lived there for a few years, and I was like, maybe going to come back. So it was this lawyer that I was dealing with, really nice woman, and she had a great business, but she ran it all through like a Facebook page, and it was getting kind of messy. She would always be telling me like, oh, sorry, I didn't see your message. I got so many messages on Facebook, it just gets lost. And so after a few calls like this, I was like, oh, build this woman a website. Like this obviously makes a lot of sense. So I asked her, could I do this? And she's like, yeah, like we always wanted to get one. We just never got around to it. We have one right now, but it's terrible. It's all broken. So I was like, okay, perfect. I can do this. I've been doing it the last couple of weeks. She's like, nice. Like how much would you want for this? And in my mind, I was like, just say like a crazy figure. So I was like, oh, $2,000. And she's like, yeah, no problem. So I was like, wow. And it's actually, out of all the money I ever made in my life to this day, that deal was actually like the best feeling deal, because I was just like, man, this is crazy. Like I'm actually doing it like a real online business. It's not like a, you know, crazy idea or some hack or some kind of gimmick. It's like real value exchange.
Yeah, I totally feel you. That very first freelance gig I got as well. And I remember applying to the job thinking, I will never get this day rate. Why? Like I was so surprised that this was even a job offer. And why from all the people that would apply there, I should get the job in the first place. And I applied, I got that gig, and I never had that excitement for a job. Like that very first freelance gig, I guess similar to that website. And now when you think of it, $2,000 for a website nowadays is super cheap. Yeah. And especially if you do it in high quality. But there were a few things that you mentioned that I wanted to get into. And one was kind of the transition from the oil industry to starting your own business, moving to a country where the average living costs were $300. So you went from $1,000 a day to working for a 14-year-old teenager who paid you $150 or something for a full website, who was the most terrible client as well, who was half your age at the time, and then kind of your boss How do you deal with that transition?
Yeah, like, it was pretty rough. Like, it just felt, well, I knew what I didn't want, which is good. And that's why I didn't want to quit. I just didn't want to go back and work a regular job. Like, at that point in my life, and we moved pretty fast, but there's a lot of jobs in between where I like worked in offices for a couple of months and worked in like a fast food place. I worked at a petrol station, or a gas station as some people call them. Worked at Burger King when I was younger. Like, I just had all this like pain that I don't want to work one of these jobs. I don't want to be someone in an office for 40 years, using a photocopy machine, like down in some department and just going crazy. So that was like the pain of like, don't give in, basically. So I had a fair bit of pain that I would take that I considered like worth it to avoid that other bigger pain. And after oil, I was just annoyed at that scenario. Like, I used to, for that job, like, I was giving everything, and I was the most worked guy in the business, which is pretty crazy because I wasn't there that long in the year before they like let everyone go. So I remember there was times I would be partying like New Year's Eve, and they would call me and they're like, hey, someone else just got injured on the oil rig. We need you here, like, ready to go. And I would like leave parties, get in my truck, drive 6 hours to grab the equipment, drive 14 hours to start work, and I'd be there for 40 days with like no notice whatsoever. So it was good money, but I had like zero freedom. Like, not, in every sense of the word. Like, they literally could call me and I would just have to leave whatever I was doing, like hanging out with friends, hanging out with a girl, snowboarding, like, get the call, I'm in the truck, 30 minutes later, I'm on the road. I don't even know when I'm going to be back or anything. So after that experience and all these other jobs, I was just like, I'm going to make this work. Like, I'll literally, like that movie Shawshank Redemption, like I will crawl through the pipe to get out of this scenario. So yeah, with these Upwork people, it was just, it was very frustrating for sure. But I was just like, what's the thing that I'm missing here? Like, and it took me a while, actually. It took me like a couple of months to figure it out. But I was like, do I need to like say more of this? Do I need to pitch it in this way? And I just didn't see that the whole scenario was actually kind of working against me. Like, and I know some people do well on Upwork, but at that point, I just didn't have so many skills. I was still learning a lot on the skill side, and I just couldn't see how it could be worth more money. And it was only when I like got off Upwork and worked with a real business that I was like, oh, even with kind of basic enough beginner skills, if you are solving the right problems for the right people, you can still be worth like a lot, basically. So once that started to click, I could double down on it a lot, and it grew like very fast after that. But yeah, it took me a while to see that, but I was just willing to, like, the whole setup at the time was crazy. Like, I was going to these local, not even a market, they just sell food off the back of a truck, basically. I was buying like a raw chicken, like, or, it's just like the head is missing, basically. It's plucked and the head is missing, but it still has the legs and everything. Like, down in Colombia, I was living in an apartment with no hot water. There was a mattress on the ground. I just had like a desk. That was it. There's like the mattress, a chair, a desk, and a tiny little kitchen. It's Bogota as well, which, even though it's Colombia, it gets quite cold at night. So I would heat water on the stove in the morning, wait until it was boiling, and then mix it in these other pots. So I had like semi-warm water, and then you just go into the shower and just like throw it over your head and have like, because there was no hot water. So if you turn on the water from the shower, it's just a tank that's sitting on the roof, and there's no like insulation. So in the morning, it's like 2-3 degree water. So it was pretty hardcore. But
cold showers are healthy. So
yeah, like, it's healthy when you live in like Bali and afterwards you got the sun and stuff. When you're on the rooftop in Bogota, like, a cold shower is gonna like kill you. Yeah. Like, yeah. So like, looking back, actually, there's a lot of fun stories from that time. Like, it makes you, it gives you a lot of character. But I just think you kind of got to have that. You might not need it, but I think you got to have that gear that, like, if it comes down to the line, like, you're going to fight for the lifestyle and the freedom that you want. You got to have that mentally.
Did you have a network back then with other freelancers, of people who did something similar, who could have potentially told you upfront, oh, you're doing the right thing, but just for the wrong audience? Was there anything there where you feel like you could have sped up that process?
There's so much stuff I could have done that would have made it like so much faster. No, and it's so obvious. Like, I didn't have I had a good network of people that I hung out with. And what's funny is some of them are really good entrepreneurs, and I don't know why, but I never actually asked for too much advice, which, looking back, I'm like, should have gone around people, should have joined some courses or communities, should have like done more online and got in different forums. I was hanging out with people, but I just literally wasn't asking anyone about this stuff. I was trying to do it all solo. I don't know why, looking back, maybe I just felt like I had some lessons to learn and that I should learn them solo. But I don't know if I would agree with that nowadays. But at the time, it was just like, you got to do this, like you got to figure it out. So I was kind of in this like lone wolf, sit in the room, make it work. I was reading a couple of books. That was about it. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff I could have done to speed it up. Just get around better people, like watch tutorials, listen to podcasts, any of this sort of stuff.
Especially now with the internet, there's so many things you can Google and so much advice, free advice out there, which is very, very useful. And with your content that you put out there every day, you help so many freelancers to avoid exactly those scenarios. But I also understand the point where you're coming from. That's the thing that I noticed with the very first coach I ever had, that I had this feeling that I had to do it by myself because it's my business. You know, it's like I'm the entrepreneur, so I should know what to do, kind of thing. But in reality, nobody runs a business on their own. You're just going to burn out, and you're not gonna be as efficient and as productive, and you won't be able to do it as well by yourself. And I think, like, looking back at my beginning of the career, I had like similar situations where I just didn't ask people. I didn't talk about money. I didn't know that rate was actually the minimum day rate for UX designers in London back then. And for me, this was like, oh my God, I'm making as much money in one day as I did in a week. And now I know that you can make more money than that as well, just because I talk to other people about what their rates is. And I think it's very important to connect with other freelancers who have been in the shoes that you're in right now. What would you recommend someone who's getting started today?
Great question. And it is cool. Like, it's getting so collaborative online, and there's just so many people to connect with. So I kind of think that you need like 3 different levels. Like, this is what I tried to do. So people around you are at the same level, and just like, you're like peers. So you're going to push each other, keep each other accountable, share what's working, what's not. And that's like your kind of core group. Then you probably want 1 or 2 people a couple of steps ahead of you. They could be like someone you deal with directly, like a coach. Could be a community you're in, could be a product you're watching or someone's podcast or whatever. A couple of steps ahead, so you can kind of just like get clarity on the next few things to be doing to push to that level. And then I think you need a few people who are way ahead as well. They're just like, okay, in 5-10 years, I would like to be this sort of person doing these sort of things. So I try and aim for myself like those 3 levels, like good peers, someone that I can deal with directly to guide me the next couple of steps, and then someone you're like, yeah, like if I can get to that sort of lifestyle, like those sort of goals, like that's kind of my, I don't say North Star, it sounds kind of cheesy, but you know what I mean? Like that's because your mind needs to see it, I believe. Like it's very hard to come up with something if you don't have real reference points. So I look for a few people that I'm like this, the way this person does this, like that's what I would like for myself in the future. The way they live in this way, this other person, that's what I would like this sort of setup, this sort of house, this sort of business, these sort of clients. So I try and like piece that together from kind of real people and create my own goal there.
If I'm 100% honest, this is the reason why I signed up to your coaching program.
Cool. So what was it?
So I'm also coaching freelancers. I'm actually a UX designer. I've been doing well for the past 4 or 5 years as a freelancer, but I noticed that a few people I met traveling asked me about how to become a freelancer, and I really loved that feeling when they called me, I just got my first gig. Or when they said, I applied for this job, I don't know, what price should I say? And I would tell them a price like, this is way too much. And I'm like, if it doesn't scare you, if the number doesn't scare you, it's not worth to work for it. And then they'd set that number, they would get that gig, and they're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I get so excited seeing other people's successes that I thought maybe I can transition into doing that as my main business rather than do UX design. I still love UX, but it doesn't give me that same like cozy fuzzy feeling as seeing someone else get to where they want to get to just by a bit of advice that you give them. So I was looking into, okay, what do I need to do that? Are there other people online that already do that? And then I came across your profile. So one of my friends actually recommended you to me. And then when you started this coaching program, I thought, this would be a good sneak peek to see how you do it, how you manage everything, how you get people on board, and what type of people you have on the course. What was it for you to start your coaching business?
Yeah. So going way back from a young age, and not like to get too into it, but I always felt like that lack of like having someone to help me when I look back at like, 18 or younger. I feel like I had to make a lot of mistakes myself to just figure things out in general in life. So as I got older, I really valued being able to like coach people or help people. So at university, I had a cool university. It's kind of like a sports university. So you could do a lot of different clubs and it was subsidized by the university. So I got involved in like kayaking, skydiving, like surfing, windsurfing, which is pretty cool. Like you get to do all these things. So with all of these, I would try and get in a position like after I got good at it myself, where I'd be helping the next year, showing them how to do it, running the trips, organizing stuff. I used to be a lifeguard as well during the semester as a job. So you do a bit of coaching there. And in the summers, I worked at summer camps with like kids, like teaching them water sports and like water confidence and these sort of things. So I always like to give back and help people. I just enjoy that experience as a teacher, what you're talking about there as well, like the feeling of seeing someone else stuck, you help them, they succeed, and like you give them what they need to keep going. So when freelancing started to take off, I was documenting the whole journey. So when it sucked, I was like posting up online on a couple of different places like, hey, I'm trying to do this, it's not going well, all this sort of stuff. And then when it started to take off, I was sharing like, whoa, it's really popped. Here's what I'm making. Like I've only been doing this like less than a year, because it started to get to like really good months. So a lot of people at that stage started to come along and were like, hey, how are you doing this? Like, hey, can I get started? Or they were already going and they were stuck. Like, how are you selling? How are you getting these clients? This sort of stuff. So in the beginning, I started a free Facebook group, and that grew over time to like 15,000 people, which is pretty crazy. I shut it down because it just kept growing. And I get like, I don't know if you get this too, but I try and help everyone. So it's good and bad. Like you can burn yourself into the ground basically. And I've learned over the years, like how to have better barriers or better like personal standards. But in the beginning, like I was losing sleep over like helping people in the free Facebook group. Like I would actually, it sounds kind of crazy, but I would get like anxiety, like waking up in the night and you're like, what if someone has a question? And like, it sounds ridiculous. So anyway, I had this free Facebook group and then people wanted more. So I was like, okay, I'll run some coaching calls. So I did like 5 calls. You could get 5 hours and it was like $500. And we do like 5 by 1 hour calls. So I did this, it just like full up straight away. And then when I finished it, this other guy that I knew who's like a copywriter, he's like, dude, like you got to charge more for your time. Like don't do this for $100 an hour, charge $500 an hour. And I was like, no one's paying $500 an hour. It's like that isn't possible. That isn't a real thing. And he's like, no, like I've worked with high ticket offers, like as a copywriter, like sometimes they charge like these sort of amounts. And I was like, that is not going to work. I was like, no one's going to pay this. He's like, just do it. So he like over like a week or two, because the time is coming up where I would have to open up new slots. He's like, just do it. So I did it. And interestingly, it sold out as well. But what I noticed actually was the quality got way better. So when it was 100 an hour, I was getting people who were like thinking about starting and they're like going to do something, and the next week they still haven't done anything. And when I charged more money, more serious people showed up, and I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. So after I ran that batch, I was starting to also notice I was getting a lot of the same questions. I still didn't feel comfortable with charging high prices for coaching because I was like, oh, just help people. Like these are people like me who were stuck. So instead of like keep going with, high ticket, whatever they call it, I met a course and just added in loads of people at like a very affordable price. This went on for a long time. And then it kind of just evolved into a full school. And it's only this year that I've come back to coaching and, what you're now in the coaching program. So yeah, it's interesting. Like it is kind of a crazy world. Coaching is a bit of a mad place. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens in all different spectrums. But I think at the core, if you're in the right place, it's super enjoyable. Like to help people and see them win is one of the best things. And after yourself, like after you've succeeded yourself, it's still nice to continue to succeed, but there's like diminishing satisfaction out of each bit more of progress. So it's still fun to progress personally, but I definitely get like more out of like, oh, this person's stuck, they can quit a job, now they get going. So personally for me, it's just something that I really connect with.
I think especially when someone texts you, I just quit my full-time job, it's this, Okay, I know it's going to work out, but at the same time, you don't know 100% for sure because it still depends on how much the person is driving towards the goal, etc. But it's also this cheerleading moments like, oh my God, finally you quit your job because from now on it's going to accelerate going up. But also it's this very scary phase. And also what you said about the anxiety of not replying to people. I have this mental to-do list of the people that messaged me for advice, and I don't have a big following, so I cannot imagine how many messages you must get. But I get messages from someone who said, oh, can you have a look at my vlog? And that's like a 10-minute vlog, not crazy amounts of times, but you would have to watch the 10-minute video, then you'd have to sit down to give the feedback, etc. And I don't mind doing this stuff, but there are so many other things that I should be doing, and I feel bad not replying because I want to help all of them, but you just physically can't. There isn't enough time in the day to do that. How do you pick who to help, or do you take that general information and create a reel out of this, or how do you deal with this anxiety or this feeling that you want to help but you know you can't help everyone?
Yeah. This is a great question. It's one I don't get to talk about too much because I don't want to like seem like you're preaching to your audience, like, hey, you know, like you're trying to whatever. But so where this started for me was just sheer numbers. The free group grew to a number that it just literally became impossible. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I tried to answer everything, like literally like every question I was answering. And then it just kept growing and growing. And it got to a level, and I should have had better personal boundaries where I caught this earlier, but it just got to a level where it just was not possible. And I pushed it way past what was even like what I just said before. Well, like I was losing sleep, like I couldn't relax. I couldn't do anything for myself. And I did it for a long time. And eventually I was like, it can't go on like this. Like this is just completely unrealistic. So at that time, there's a free group and there's another course. So I just decided, hey, if people are serious, I've been in this group for like 2 years helping you out for free. Just come join the course. It's not even that much money. So I shut down the free group. A couple of people were annoyed, whatever, but it was what it was. I was like, I just literally can't run it like this anymore. So from that time, I've kind of learned I've seen the lesson that if you want to help people, you can't just give away yourself freely. You have to pick the people that are, you know, that it makes sense to help the most. And it sounds like kind of cutthroat, but it just is the fact of being a coach, especially as your audience grows. Like right now on Instagram, it's 170,000. So if each person messaged me once per year, it's like 500 messages a day. So you just get to a point where you're like, I can't respond to everyone. So what I've kind of done, or how I look at it, you're probably the same, is I look for people who are taking action and who are serious about themselves. So if someone writes a message and it's got a bunch of typos, I go to their profile, they got like hardly any photos, they have a cat as a profile photo, they don't even have a real username, and they're asking a question that you could just find on Google in 5 seconds, or you could just like a basic question that's already answered like in lots of different places. I just kind of skip over them because I think it's a lesson that they're going to have to learn. It's kind of tough love, but it's like if you can't show up at a certain level and then you're like just wanting someone else to jump in and fix out all your problems, like you're never going to get there anyway. So that's kind of how I see it. I'm actually really open to helping people, but now I just screen a lot more like who's serious about it, who's not, who's actually going to take this advice and put it into action, or who's just like, hey, can you figure this out for me? And they're too lazy to do it themselves. It sounds harsh. If you're watching this as a beginner, you might be like, this guy, you know, whatever. But it is what it is. I truly believe there's like that people at a higher level than you are really eager to help people get up to their level. Like it's in the beginning, when you're at the lower levels, it might seem at the top that people are very like closed off and they're competitive and they're not friendly and they're going to like try push you down. I actually find it's the exact opposite. The higher level the people I've connected with, the more generous they are, the more collaborative they are. But by the nature of their position, they have to be very careful with who they help and don't help, because they'll just burn up so much energy if they put it in the wrong area. So they look for people who are serious, who are showing up, who are putting in action, and who aren't going to waste their time in nonsense sort of ways. So it just is what it is. I think that's how it goes for all these top people one way or another, because there's just so much demand on their time and they do want to help, So they become very like particular about who's worth working with and who's not. And if you're at the lower levels, I think the best things to do is show up in the best way possible. So if you don't take yourself serious, no one else is going to take yourself serious. If you don't value yourself, no one else is going to value you. No offense. So professional profiles, you're trying to make good content, you're adding value, which I know is a generic phrase, but this is actually huge. Do you mind if I go on a bit more of a...
Go on.
Yeah. So this is something I learned actually in university, and it's probably like one of the main things that's helped me connect with a lot of people. So a little bit of a story, but at university in one of these clubs, the windsurfing club, you used to be able to like show up to these parties and there'd be loads of free beer there. And it wasn't free, someone else had bought the beer, but they would buy it and just leave a box of beer and you could like help yourself basically. So I was a broke student. I was like, oh, I just joined this club. And I was like, yeah, like free beer, I'll go to these parties. So I was always drinking the free beer and I wasn't bringing any beer myself. And one day, one of the top members pulled me aside and he said, hey, you know, what you're doing, people notice. He's like, the people who buy this beer don't say anything, but they notice that you're always showing up at no beer and you're taking their beer. And he's like, what will happen is people won't say this to you, but over time, you'll notice that you're invited to less parties, people are less friendly, you start to develop a reputation, and then one day you're just like not going to any parties and no one wants to hang out with you. He's like, that's what will happen. He said, nobody will say it to you along the way, but that's where you will get yourself to. And he said, what you want to do is show up and like, how do you add value? Like bring beers, bring cool people, make the party better, bring some food, just, you know, whatever it is. Like if it's energy, if it's something, like just add to it rather than show up and be a taker. So I seen that way of looking at things in kind of everything. Like I started to notice it's the same in business. It's the same in any sort of networking, any sort of community. A lot of people just show up. Like I was at an event in Warsaw here in Poland a couple of months ago. And it's nothing personal. I'm not like attacking people, but like a lot of people just show up and they just take from the event. So they sit there for 6-7 hours. They listen to everybody. They're taking their notes. So they're taking, and which is, you know, that's what they paid for. But at the end of the event, I noticed that people were running up to the speakers and asking them even more questions. And this is someone who's been on stage for hours, teaching everything they can. And now like people are going up asking even more. And it's like, you have enough. Like you've listened to them for hours. They've given so much advice. Why don't you like see what you can give to them rather than taking that much more? So it was Christo's event from the future. So just like swinging that around, just to give an example, like I was like, okay, this guy's been on stage all day. I'm sure he's tired. He definitely wants some food. So kind of figured out like, how can I bring him out and treat him to dinner? So talked to some of his team, eventually talked to him. I was like, you know, let's go out. There's a place. So we went for food, got food for everyone, that sort of way. So just added value. And now me and Chris like chat a little bit back and forth on social media, like I'm on his radar, but just a different mindset. So in the beginning, you need to see that, especially with networking online. Like when you join anything or you're part of anything, don't just show up, ask, you know, unlimited questions and you're just taking all the time. And then you're like, oh, why didn't anybody notice me or connect with me? Like you got to see like, oh, you know, I'm in Elizabeth's group. I'm one of her Instagram followers. How do I add value to it? Like what's a cool comment I can post on a reel that makes hair look good, that adds value to the page, that's good for the audience, these sort of things. And if you can do that, I think you can get on people's radars very fast and you can get some really cool people to want to work with you, to want to help you, to mentor you. If you don't, then it is what it is. You just blend into the crowd of millions of people online who just show up and consume and ask questions and disappear again. And that's just part of what's online, but those people never really get too far with you know, breaking through to the next levels.
It's interesting that you say that because, again, I don't have a huge following, but there are a few people that I know from my following because they comment on a couple of posts or they're mini cheerleaders, especially one of them, Gina. I actually interviewed her on a previous podcast, and everything, like most of the things I post, we chat about it. And we also had some business chats and calls prior to recording the podcast and help each other out. She was the one who recommended to me for the podcast to use Anchor, things like that. So you kind of have this rapport with people where if she would not have connected with me, maybe I would have gotten that information elsewhere, but she adds value. And I also feel like I add value to her. And we're kind of, it's the kind of 3-tier layer that you said before. We're kind of peers. So we're both trying to achieve a bit more. We push each other. We are supporting each other. And also what you said, so one thing standing out and the other thing about giving value, because people will not follow people that also just take. It's like those Instagram accounts that just sell things to you. You unfollow them unless they actually provide you value. Otherwise, you will not stick to them. So it's a both-way thing. One of the other things you mentioned with the beer party, the person that pulled you out and said, well, people will not tell you, but this is what's going to happen. And it's kind of part with self-awareness. If you don't notice that you do this, then you will continue doing this. And then you will start thinking, oh, what am I doing wrong? Or nobody invites me to things. What have I done? Not being aware of those things. So it's good that you had the person make you aware of it. Because like you said, not everyone will come to you and tell you, oh, people are not inviting you to that party because you just take the beer, you don't bring anything back. How do you think can you train that self-awareness if you didn't have that person to come and tell you that?
It takes a shift in mindset, and it's kind of hard to do because in the beginning you feel at all levels you kind of feel like I want more. So when you show up to something, your natural human inner brain is like take like snatch it all, like we need it, like we need help, we need answers, we need support, like all this stuff. So you have to just see that everything you go into, there's always going to be some take. Like you are there, you're in a group to learn. So you, of course, don't you show up and you're now working for the person and you're not looking after yourself. So there's a fair amount of taking. That's just given in any scenario. Otherwise, people wouldn't form groups. They wouldn't have communities. They wouldn't have certain things. But you just want to put a portion into like, how can it also add value? So you're in a group, what can you do? You go to an event, can you get there early? Help people set up. Can you stay late? Help them pack down, clean up. Help them put the boxes in the van, whatever it is. So I think you just have to develop that different view. A lot of people go around in life, online, offline, just like showing up, and it's like consuming, like taking, watching, listening. They're there kind of sitting on their ass, like what am I getting out of this? And I just try and avoid that because it's funny. Like the advice is one thing, but that mentality is like the meta lesson there. It's working against you. Like if you can learn to view these things as an opportunity, a small moment to provide value, it's the same bigger skill in business. Like you just don't show up in a business and take. You have to show up and add and be something better, something unique. Like you're putting energy into this. You're making it easier for people to get results. You're making it feel better for them on their journey. So if you can do it on the small level, you start to see it on the big level. So it's kind of a thing you can practice. And then once you see it click, I just think it's going to help you the whole way across with everything in business, no matter what your business is. If you can see that you just can't have a take mindset, it has to be what's going on in the world of the other person and how can you make it better for them.
Do you think since you started freelancing more or less as a teenager until now, I mean, I don't know how old you actually are, but like...
I'm 35. I started freelancing at 27. So I started pretty late actually, yeah.
When you look back at your whole career path, even prior to the internet, are there any set rules that you feel like will stay no matter what's going to happen with technology, with AI, in the online or offline world, wherever you're freelancing? Are there any tips that you give people that want to go this career path where they have their own business, where you feel like this will stand out no matter what's going to happen with technology, other than what you just mentioned with adding value?
Yeah. Okay, great question. So I like hedge my bets. Like when you maybe you feel this as well, when you start to make money online and you start to think long term, you're like, oh, it's kind of crazy. Like imagine when you're 40 still making money online, when you're 50, when you're 60. And obviously we all hope that we're well retired by that age and we've stacked all our money. But it's kind of like an interesting exercise where you're like, how would you future proof your income or your ability to make money when you want or when you need to make money? So for me, I put very little faith in my technical skills because they just go out of, like, I'm able to do stuff technically, But I know in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, pretty much everything I know now technically will be totally obsolete. So where I put most of my time is like business skills, sales skills, marketing, branding, personal skills, community, coaching skills, like all the skills that you could just carry over that will always be there regardless of technology. So that's where like I put my time, like just learning about these things all the time, getting better at them, because there'll always be a way to quickly get up to speed with technology. It will always be a pretty even playing field. Like it's not like there's some social app that the best people know about that we don't. Like everyone's kind of on the same field. If you were completely new to, let's say, Instagram, within like 2-3 weeks, you could watch a bunch of courses, tutorials. You're going to be like 80-90% up to speed. But that isn't the case with something like communication, sales skills, marketing. Like these are things you can master over years, and there's so many levels to it. Like you'll never get to 100%. So for me, I'm trying to like develop the personal skills. Like who am I? How do I think? How do I communicate? How do I sell? How do I persuade? And I think if you can stay on top of that, then you just like completely future-proofed your business, no matter what happens, what economy, global situation, you know, pandemic, whatever it is. Like you'll have the ability to make money as much as you want if you can master those skills.
That's good advice. You've also recently become a dad. How has this impacted your career?
It's funny. I was thinking before we got on this, I was like, I wonder if I'm going to have the dad talk. Because I remember back, like obviously before I had a kid, I listened to podcasts and then like, yeah, I had a kid and everything's changed. I was like, oh, this sounds pretty cheesy. So I was like, you know, once people have a kid, they just won't stop talking about it. But yeah, it's been great. Obviously, it's really changed my priorities. When I first started freelancing, to be honest, in Colombia, it was just to make money, to party and travel and like have a good time. And it was like that for a few years. Then the focus is like, okay, let's like secure my own personal future and like build up my level of actually like having some money and savings and all this sort of stuff. So I went through that phase for a while. And now it's definitely like the family, you know, like I have people to look after in my life. I've retired my wife, which is cool. So, you know, if she wants it, she can, of course, go do something like work. But right now she's just like hanging out with the kid, got my son, my 2 chihuahuas. So yeah, it's just this priority or this like different way of thinking now where it's like, okay, how do I make like a stable business that's going to succeed long term? I've actually changed a lot as well with where my money goes. Because if you watch where someone's money goes, that's what their values are. So back in the day, it just all went into partying. Now I'm like really just like what's a good, enjoyable business that I'm happy to run like for the next 10-20 years, that I'm going to enjoy, that the business itself, the process of working the business, growing that business, doing what it is that business does is actually going to be deeply satisfying and line up. It sounds maybe kind of cheesy or whatever, but like I've made pretty good money for quite a few years, and you start to see, I never thought it would have happened because when I grew up, I was like, oh, like, of course, when you have the money, it's just like, you know, but after quite a few years of it, you do start to see that like there is a diminishing return there with some things. Like you can't just keep making more and keep feeling better. It starts to fade out a little. Like there's only so much good food you can eat until you're like, okay, I want to just go back and eat just like clean, healthy food. There's only so many nights out you can have when you start to feel like, oh, another night out, like no way. And I haven't drank now in years, so I've kind of already gone through that phase. But yeah, it's just like it starts to, for me anyway, it starts to turn to like, you know, like developing yourself. How do you make the most out of your potential? And it sounds so cheesy. If you're not at this stage, it just always sounds like, what's this dude talking about? Like, I got to pay the bills, I want to go on holidays. But yeah, after a while of living that way, I just find that your priorities naturally change. And I wrote an email about that. I don't know if you read it a few days ago, but
is it the pain purpose?
Yeah. So it starts off with pain. It did for me anyway, where like you're trying to just pay rent, you're trying to survive, you just feel so broke, and you know, you're taking the bus, you can't like go to a nice restaurant. So it's just like continuous pain. You make more money, it turns to pleasure. You're going to travel, stay in nice hotels, eat great foods, do loads of like cool experiences. And that's great. And you can keep that. But then on top of that, another level comes in where you're like, you don't want to just live a lifestyle that's purely based on like dopamine and pleasure and like, you know, everything's enjoyment. So you start to be like, how do I have purpose? Like, who am I? What am I going to give back to people? when I look back and I'm older, like what will I be most satisfied about achieving? So I'm kind of in that groove now where I'm trying to find that on a deeper level. I have it to a good level, but I want to go more, because I look at Chris Do is one of the guys I look up to from the future. This guy is just on the road like a machine, like doing what he loves to do. And it's so impressive because he's like 51, I think. He has so much energy, and that only comes from, that's not about money. And he's making like 4-6 million a year. That comes from doing what you love and being so passionate about it. And when you're around that, you start to see that can't be bought. You can't that has to be developed from yourself, and like clarity about what you want to do, and then working on it for years. And it gives that compounding return. Like years in, it really starts to like take off, and you have to go through that process. So I'm trying to start that deeper process for myself and like build into something that I really want to run for a long time.
I think that's also the beauty of freelancing, that you can decide what you want to do, that you can create that work-life balance, life-work balance. I don't like actually that they start with work-life, because it puts work before life, but it's that beauty that you can create a life that you want for yourself. You can decide which hours to work from, where you, like you say, where you invest is where your priorities are. So even within your business, do you invest in a course that teaches you how to communicate, or are you going to invest in finding someone cheap to help you like outsource things, when you could also say, I don't want to hire someone for $5 an hour. I don't want to contribute to this gap in payments. I'm going to pay someone proper money, no matter if they sit in India or in America. What you said with the priorities you have, and how it kind of changed once you started to get the money, when the initial goal was not having money, and how cheesy it sounds when you're in those shoes. Because I was in that situation in my early 20s. I was studying, school wasn't cheap. I also paid rent in Vienna back then, and I couldn't stay with my parents because the last bus to that small town was at 7 p.m. So I would not get to that small town on time to get to my parents' town. So I had to stay in Vienna. And I worked 3-4 jobs. 1 or 2 of them were unpaid, that I just did for work experience. And now I'm not crazy rich, but through my freelance business, I made 120K in the last calendar year, which blows my mind. Revenue is not income, but it's 4 times as much as I did in my last permanent salary. So there are so many opportunities. And now I have this, like back then when I was living in Vienna paying rent, one of my biggest wishes was that I could go into any restaurant and order the food that I want, not the food that I can afford, just order whatever I want. And now, I mean, I'm in Bali, it's a bit different because of economy here and stuff, but wherever I go, even if I go to London, even if I would go to a 5-star restaurant, I know whatever is on that table, even if it would be a $2,000 lobster, I could afford it if I wanted to. I don't have to be scared pointing at any wine bottle because I know I could afford it. And it's a luxury, but at the same time, you notice, like you say, there are so many nice meals you can have. And actually the ones that give you the most comfort are home-cooked meals from your mom or your friends. Yeah. And you only learn that once you've been past that stage, and then you start appreciating it again.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to talk about, because if people haven't experienced that yet, it seems kind of like it's a sensitive topic. Some people can feel like, oh, that's just nonsense, and they get like kind of bitter, and other people just might not understand it. But it just happens. And if you take it to the extreme, you could definitely see, like, imagine some celebrity who's worth like $1 billion. Like, how many nights in a row can they go out to an expensive restaurant and eat like, crazy fancy food? Like, eventually your body just is like, hey, let's just have an apple. Let's just have a glass of water. Like, let's just go for a walk. Like, it's pretty interesting as humans that we kind of aren't designed. So like, we can't really indulge long-term without some sort of consequences. And you see this with like celebrities who get off track and like turn to drugs or OD, or just they're like a mess mentally, or like some billionaire who just like drives off a cliff or something. To a point, money definitely helps a lot of things, but then once 90% of things are covered, like, your mind starts to change. It starts to change gears. Definitely, I'd say we're similar with our values in many ways. In Bali and these places, like, once you're at a certain amount per month, like, there's not a whole lot more you can do unless you're going to get silly. Like, oh, I'm going to go to this place and, spend 1,000 on like, rare sushi, like unless you're just like blowing cash. But as far as like day-to-day living, like you're kind of like, you max it out pretty fast. Like I'm here in Poland, eat whatever I want to eat, get to do whatever I want to do, which is great. But then, yeah, your mind is like, well, where are we actually going to get like long-term satisfaction from, and that like deeper kind of feeling? And for me, it's like loving what you do and finding like who you are as a person. Like we're all unique. And again, it sounds so cheesy, but we're all unique. Like what's deep down inside, like there is a version of you that you want to become. So I think it's like you gotta get into that gear and start exploring that more. Yeah, I hope if someone's listening to this and they're starting off, that doesn't sound like so goofy.
I don't think it sounds that goofy, but again, it probably depends on what phase in your life you are. If you're working 5 jobs right now, you're probably going to think, oh, it's easy for you to say. But we've both been in those shoes where we worked 5 jobs or different jobs, so trying to get to a better place. And it's what you said, it's that pain. Are you willing to go through that pain because you know there's something else out there that you'd rather do, or another pain that you want to avoid? There are 3 questions that I ask all of my podcast guests.
Yeah, okay.
And one of those questions is, would you ever go back to a permanent job?
Interesting. There would be some jobs that maybe I would be open to doing it just for the experience, but I don't know if I would last so long.
What jobs would those be?
They would all be like kind of dream jobs, like special forces, or like a rally, like a racing driver or an actor or something. Like just the things as a kid. So like if someone's like a full-time job as like, skydiving or something, I would be like, oh yeah, sure. But probably after like half a year, I'd be like, okay, I'm going back to this thing. But like a regular type full-time job, like, no, I just don't think I could do it. And the lack of freedom, I guess, would be the huge thing, where like someone's dictating what days you have to work, what hours, like when you get to go to the bathroom, when you get to eat a sandwich. Like once you get a taste for setting life up by your own rules, it's kind of impossible to go back to that. It just is like, it's like trying to get a wild animal to behave like a domesticated pet or something. They're not going to do it like.
And if you think back to that boy in Colombia heating up his water for the shower in the morning, what would you tell him?
Like, and I kind of did, but just enjoy it, because it's actually fun when you get past that stage and you look back. Like, you have so many stories. So I have this metric with life where it's like stories per time. So, and if you look back in your life, you're like, oh, there's 6 months, and you're like, but I don't really have any stories from that 6 months. And if you talk to a friend, you never really mention that 6 months. Like my time in Colombia at that time, I could tell you stories for weeks. Like it was just so like adventurous, or on the edge. It just felt like every day was like an absolute mission in life. So that's enjoyable. Like you're getting, maybe it's not where you want to be, but you're getting more out of life. Like you actually experienced more, because during that time was so crazy. I'm sure we all know the opposite, where like a year has gone by and you're like, whoa, years just gone by, I can't even really remember what happened. Like that's kind of to me, that's kind of a waste of life. It just means like you weren't pushing things, you weren't trying to do things, like you're just stuck in a routine that your mind just like kind of blends together and forgets. So yeah, like it was hardcore living for sure, but millions of people have it worse. And it was actually quite adventurous looking back, where I'm like, there's just so many times where just crazy stuff would happen. Like, yeah. So not to, glamorize it, because it definitely wasn't glamorous, but yeah, just stick in there, enjoy it, and just trust yourself and just keep going. Like humans are so incredibly versatile, and we'll make things work if we stick with it, if we don't like drop out. And none of these things are like real challenges, like compared to someone who grows up in a country that's like war torn or super poverty or something, sleeping
especially
on a
what's
mattress.
In the news now, it's
like
crazy, actually. Yeah,
we don't have it hard. Like it's not even close to what's like, if other generations or other countries seen what we consider hard, they'd just be like, dude, you're still living like a king. So I think you got to keep that perspective as well. And again, like freelancing kind of 101 here, if you keep focusing on real skills that are valuable and you keep improving in those, you're going to have to take off. Like the marketplace literally wants and will pay for those skills. So if you get them, of course you're going to make money, and there's just no other way around it. So if you're in that phase, you just stack the skills and eventually it's going to work. Yeah.
Cool. And if you think 5 years from now, so your son will be 5 years old, probably ready to go to school. I don't know where your coaching program is going to be by then. Maybe you'll have helped hundreds, thousands of other freelancers. If you think of that person 5 years from now, what do you think would he tell you today?
I think the same thing, actually. And I was thinking about this just the other day, like, because I do sometimes, but you're probably the same as well. I put a lot of pressure on myself to progress, to be at the next level. I always, you know, that expression, like, if you're not the smartest person in the room, like, I continuously like get around people at a higher level. And I'm trying to like balance that these days, where it's like, enjoy the moment, because I will look back and be like, that was such a good moment right now. Like, you're trying to get to this level, you just, you know, had your kid, like, you're living in this place. So definitely trying to make the most out of enjoying it, but then at the same time keep progressing and keeping that balance. So yeah, I've been working on that a bit mentally. You don't want to go too one way or the other. You don't want to full enjoyment mode and you never progress and then things dropped off, or like you're just always living in the future and you don't enjoy what you have. So it's kind of tricky. I find it personally, it's a delicate balance in there. Cool. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. That's all from me. Anyone who's interested to learn more about you, where can they find you?
On Instagram is probably the easiest. I'm the Rob O'Rourke. And then if you want like coaching, it's profitableskills.com. Connect with me on Instagram, shoot me a message or a comment on the post or whatever's good.
Nice. I'll link all of those in the show notes. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, super fun. I hope it helps and it was valuable advice.
I'm sure it is. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
I really enjoyed talking with Rob. If you're interested in his program, I've added the link to learn more about it in the description. Once you join, you get access to a Slack community where you can connect with fellow freelancers. There's also weekly group coaching calls to talk for anything you need guidance with. And every now and then, Rob also invites guest speakers to cover topics like how you brand yourself as a freelancer or how you promote yourself on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode, hit the follow button and leave a review. That's all from me, and I can't wait to have you again next week.